Welcome to another episode of Nerd Notes. I'm your host, Coach Stahlecker. Today I want to talk to you about one of the most important skills that you will learn here in school, but one that is often neglected because it's not cool, and that's reading. It's a fundamental part of not only your education, but also your life after school. Reading is a skill that you learn when you are young, but you have to do it constantly in order to keep it sharp. By the time you've reached the 7th or 8th grade, your reading skills can plateau if you're not reading every day. And that's partly because you're not reading for fun anymore. You might argue that reading isn't fun, but I would argue that you're probably just reading the wrong books. There's so much that you already love about literature, you just need an expert like me to show you where to find it. Some of the biggest hits of early movie making were retellings of classic literature. Universal Pictures' popular monster movies of the 1930s were based on Dracula by Bram Stoker and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which she wrote as part of a friendly competition with her husband and other writers to see who could come up with the best horror story. 1939 is considered by many to be one of the most legendary years in the history of Hollywood movies. Its two biggest success stories were Gone with the Wind, which is based on a 1,000-page novel by Pulitzer Prize-winning author Margaret Mitchell, and The Wizard of Oz, which is based on the children's series by L. Frank Baum from the early 1900s. I know what you're thinking. What about a movie that was made in this century? Well, even some of the films that you know and love from the last few years are from stories written generations ago. Do you love the story of a young prince betrayed by his uncle, left for dead, only to meet two comedic sidekicks and return to glory? You think that's The Lion King? No, it's Shakespeare, namely Hamlet, which is what the popular Disney movie is based on. The same can be said for the classic teen comedy 10 Things I Hate About You, which is a retelling of the famous play Taming of the Shrew, and those stories are like 500 years old. Jane Austen wrote several romantic comedy novels in the early 1800s that have been turned into successful movies. One of her most noted works, Pride and Prejudice, inspired several modern productions, including a Bollywood musical and a dark take on the story in the novel and film Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. These aren't the cheesy romance novels of Nicholas Sparks, but hey, all those movies are based on books too.
What do you want? What do you want?
The 20th century brought us everyone's favorite secret agent, James Bond.
My name is Bond.
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 James Bond.
The Super Spy franchise has spawned 25 films and a very successful line of video games, all based on a series of novels from English writer Ian Fleming in the early 1950s. A group of early 20th century British novelists wrote amazing fantasy stories that Hollywood couldn't make into movies until technology caught up with the storytelling. There was T.H. White's The Sword and the Stone, which has been retold in a number of Hollywood films about King Arthur. The popular Narnia series by C.S. Lewis, which spawned 3 films in the last decade with more planned. And let's not forget Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, which inspired 2 film trilogies and several video games that have grossed more than $6 billion worldwide. In the 21st century, there's only one undisputed queen of British fantasy, and that's the author of the Harry Potter series, J.K. Rowling. Her 7-book series on The Boy Who Lived inspired a multi-billion-dollar film franchise, video games, Lego sets, amusement parks, and more. In the years since the last book was published, she's expanded the franchise to include the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and is the first author in history to have a net worth over $1 billion. In the last decade, the success of Harry Potter made Hollywood take note, and a rush of films based on young adult fiction hit the big screen. These included The Hunger Games, Percy Jackson, the Divergent series, and the world's sparkliest vampires in Twilight. In almost every case, the source material for these films is much more highly regarded than the movies themselves. So if you want the better version, read the book. Unless it's the classic young adult novel The Outsiders, in which they are equally excellent. Stay golden, pony boy. Hollywood is usually so eager to adapt books into movies because they offer a seemingly never-ending supply of original ideas and a built-in audience willing to spend money. The #1 movie in the country right now is the horror thriller It by Stephen King. An astonishing 50+ of his books and short stories have been made into movies or TV shows. These include The Dark Tower, The Shining, The Green Mile, and one of my personal favorites, the Arnold Schwarzenegger action film The Running Man, which King wrote under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. Even the two most popular TV shows on right now are based on books. The HBO series Game of Thrones is adapted from the George R.R. Martin fantasy series A Song of Ice and Fire, and AMC's The Walking Dead is based on the comic book series by Robert Kirkman that spans 170 issues since 2003. Now that's binge-worthy reading. I saved comic books for last because if you know me, you know that they're near and dear to my heart. You can see that I have a collection of over 200 graphic novels on my bookshelf behind me, and a filing cabinet here in my office that has over 1,000 comic books. From movies to TV shows to action figures and lunchboxes, comics and especially superheroes have become a huge part of pop culture. Part of this is because at one time, comics had declined so rapidly in popularity that in order to pay their debts, Marvel had sold their film rights to many of their characters. This brought us the first X-Men and Spider-Man films in the early 2000s, but since the inception of the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the release of Iron Man in 2008, the company has been making movies in-house and releases 2 or 3 huge blockbusters a year, with the biggest entries still to come. They've also expanded their universe to TV with the Daredevil, Luke Cage, and Defenders series on Netflix, as well as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. DC has a longer history of success dating back to the iconic Superman film of 1978, 1989's Batman,
I'm Batman.
and the very successful Dark Knight trilogy. But until this summer's Wonder Woman, recent entries had been fair at best. The great thing about comics, or any book for that matter, is that if the story on the screen ends, you can pick up the next volume and find out what happens next for your favorite characters. There are an infinite number of books that can take your imagination to places you've never been, or maybe you have and you just want to go back. The best part about all of this is that they're available to you for free right here in your school's library. We even have an accomplished author right here on campus. Try reading Mr. Spivey's Symbols of Aura series. Truth is, reading for fun helps you become a better reader. It's something that you're going to have to do for the rest of your life, but you need to keep practicing it while you're young. It can be fulfilling and entertaining too, as long as you find something that you're interested in reading. So go pick up a book and continue chasing greatness doing what you love. That's it for this episode of Nerd Notes. See you next time. Do you like videos like this? You can find me on YouTube at Hero City EdWorks or follow me on Twitter at Hero City Kevin.